house is still, too still, gets holding its breath with me. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels trained. Tell me, have you ever apologized so much that your voice started sounding wrong, even to yourself? Before we start, one thing. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? I love seeing how far these stories quietly travel. And if this already hits somewhere deep, like the video and subscribe. And if you've ever shrunk yourself just to keep someone else calm, just write, "I'm still here." I'll understand. Today, I spoke. And he wasn't there to correct me. I'm still sitting on the old sofa, the fabric worn but comforting beneath me, feeling stunned by what just happened a few minutes ago. It was just a simple conversation with Mrs. Langley, my neighbor. But something inside me feels changed, as if I stumbled upon a forgotten part of myself. I remember how I laughed freely, shared a story without hesitation, and, most surprisingly, didn't apologize once. That old voice in my head tried to creep in, the one that always made me soften everything I said, that made me apologize before anyone was even upset. It whispered that I should say sorry for laughing, for having an opinion, for simply existing out loud, but it was quieter today, pushed back somehow. I kept thinking, when did I start explaining everything I say as if it were a mistake? When did my voice shrink so small that I needed permission to use it? The silence around me now is gentle but heavy with memories, echoes of other afternoons that weren't like this. Past days when every word I uttered would bounce off his sharp gaze, every phrase carefully dissected and corrected, as if I were a fragile thing that needed fixing. For decades, I practiced choosing my words so they wouldn't trigger him. I perfected a quietness that wasn't really silence, but a continuous apologizing, an endless dance to avoid his disapproval. I remember the early days too. Alan was different then. Kind, attentive, almost like he genuinely cared about the details of what I said. He'd say I was smart, encouraging me to express myself better, as if he was helping me find a clearer version of my own voice. I was vulnerable, recently separated, feeling fragile under the weight of my losses. His attention felt like a shelter I hadn't known I needed. I thought maybe this was love, but love felt like control in disguise, slowly tightening its grip, like roots creeping under the skin. The kind words turned into corrections, the thoughtful questions into accusations, and the gentle looks into cold warnings. Each time I spoke, I started second-guessing myself. If I laughed too loudly or disagreed, I could almost hear the disdain behind his words. "You're exaggerating," he'd say, or, "That's not what I meant." Words that chipped away at my certainty and planted seeds of doubt where confidence used to grow. I wonder now if I ever really had a voice that was truly my own, or if it had been whispering beneath layers of fear all along. The thought unsettles me more than the memory of his coldness. I want to believe I was imagining things sometimes, blaming myself for feeling silenced. Maybe I was overreacting. But today, sitting here, the weight lifts ever so slightly with the memory of laughter that needed no pardon. The house is quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. But my mind races with the ghosts of all those moments when I mustered the courage to speak, only to be met with silence or correction. The tension in my shoulders loosens just a little, as I realize the old reflex, the need to apologize reflexively, isn't as automatic anymore. I find myself wondering if this freedom was always inside me, waiting to be heard. When did this happen? When did fear start living in my throat? When did speaking up become so dangerous that whispering seemed safer? I never noticed the cracks forming, the walls building around my voice until I was a shadow of myself, quiet, unsure, and constantly apologizing. Maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that he controlled me, but that I believed the control was my fault. I look at my hands, the same hands that used to gesture freely while I talked, now folded tightly in my lap. They tremble slightly as I recall the last time I spoke without fear. It wasn't in a confrontation or a shout. It was in a simple conversation, the kind that should have nothing heavy in it. Yet it felt like the first time I'd broken through an invisible barrier. I wasn't screaming or defending. I was simply being heard. I try to hold on to that feeling, that small but powerful moment of clarity. It doesn't erase the years of silence or the endless rehearsals of what I could say without upsetting him, but it offers a flicker of hope in the dark room I've been living in. Maybe the opposite of fear isn't courage after all. It's truth. The truth of my own voice, steady and clear, no longer trembling. I want to remember this afternoon like a secret seed planted deep in the soil of my soul, a day when the whispers stopped and my words finally took flight. I don't know where this path will lead, but I can feel the first steps away from that old, suffocating silence. I have so many questions still, doubts swirling like leaves in a restless wind. Was I always this afraid? Was the voice I lost really mine to begin with? My eyes drift to the window, where the sun spills golden light onto the quiet street. I think about the woman smiling and talking just moments ago, the one who didn't shrink or apologize. Somehow, she feels like a stranger and a friend I'm only beginning to meet. And if I can keep listening, maybe she will speak louder every day. For now, I sit with this new, fragile power inside me. The power to say something without fear, to laugh without a hidden apology, to be heard for who I really am. It is not an explosion or a battle cry, but a soft, steady flame glowing in the dark. The door is still closed, but for the first time in a long time, I know it can open. At first, Alan was different. He came into my life like a breeze, gentle, cultured, and strangely attentive to every little thing I said. It felt like he hung on my words, curious and engaged, making me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. There was something calming about his presence, a maturity that seemed to promise stability in the chaotic aftermath of my past. He told me I was smart, told me he admired my thoughts, and only wanted to help me express them better. I wanted to believe in that kindness. I wanted to believe I was chosen by someone who saw my worth beyond my fragile edges. His compliments felt like light after so much darkness. When he said things like I just needed to learn to express myself better, I didn't question it much. I thought it was care, his way of helping me stand taller in the world. But the first cracks appeared in small moments that barely registered at first. I remember a gathering where I was telling a story about my childhood, and he interrupted, not harshly, but enough to unsettle me, and explained my own words as if they were unclear, as if I hadn't said it right the first time. He said he only wanted people to understand me better, but it felt like he was correcting me, not helping. It was subtle, almost invisible, like a flicker on the edge of my awareness, but it pulled me into the habit of watching myself, choosing every word carefully to avoid those interruptions. What began as gentle guidance turned into a quiet rulebook of what I could say, how I should say it, and when it was safe to speak at all. Those moments grew into a pattern. In public, I noticed him stepping in to clarify what I meant, casting a shadow on my voice. He'd say things like, "I'm just making sure they really understand you." But the tone carried an edge I wasn't ready to face. With each correction, my confidence shrank a little more, swallowed beneath his insistence that I wasn't clear enough or precise enough. He watched me closely, his eyes lingering too long on my gestures, my expressions. Sometimes he'd pause mid-sentence, waiting for me to revise my words, to pull them back or soften them. I learned to predict the weight of his gaze, a silent warning that I'd crossed some invisible boundary. The air between us thickened with unspoken rules. The care he showed felt claustrophobic. I started timing my words, rehearsing jokes to make sure they wouldn't offend, learning how to laugh quietly so as not to seem loud. When I saw a film and shared my opinion, even if gentle and brief, he'd scoff or dismiss it with a phrase so common, I began to dread hearing it. "You're exaggerating." The sting wasn't just in the words, but in the way they eroded my sense of reality. I tried to hold on to the early hope, to the idea that he wanted the best for me. "Maybe this was just tough love," he said in his calm voice. Maybe I was too sensitive. That inner conflict tightened around my chest, wanting to believe, wanting to be seen as strong and reasonable, yet feeling smaller, more uncertain with each passing day. The house filled with unspoken tensions. I noticed the tiny clicks of his tongue when I spoke about things that mattered to me. I caught his looks, the ones that made me question if I had said the right thing or if I should erase the thought entirely. His hands would twitch, a subtle impatience that lingered just below his surface politeness. I started to swallow words mid-sentence. I felt the sweat across my palms as though the mere act of speaking was exposing me to danger. My shoulders tensed, my breath shortened whenever I sensed his disapproval. I altered my tone, softened my opinions. The woman who used to talk with ease was disappearing, replaced by someone who apologized before finishing a thought, someone who began sentences with, "Maybe I'm wrong, but..." The silences grew heavy in the room. Not the comfortable silences where understanding lives, but the kind that suffocate you slowly, reminding you that freedom comes at a cost. I noticed myself shrinking, not physically, but inside, where my voice lived. My words became whispers, hidden behind cautious smiles and fleeting glances. It was a gradual tightening, like water closing around me, unnoticed until I barely recognized the shape of my own identity. The warmth in his early smiles turned cold, almost mechanical. His control wrapped around me in invisible threads disguised as concern and protection. I was both inside and outside myself, watching the gradual disappearance, too scared to resist and too tired to escape. The balance shifted without fanfare, without dramatic confrontations. It was a slow erosion of trust in my own perceptions. He told me I was forgetful, that I misremembered conversations, that I was too emotional. Little phrases designed to confuse, to plant doubt. "You're imagining things," he'd say. And suddenly I questioned the memories that kept me grounded. My mind became a battlefield of uncertainties. Every sentence from him was replayed and dissected over and over. Was I really wrong? Was I the problem? The gaslighting was sneaky, a silent parasite feeding on my self-esteem. I found myself apologizing incessantly, preempting anger, hoping to prevent the cold disappointment in his eyes. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of the woman I used to be in the mirror, a flicker of the voice I still carried inside. But the reflection was faint, shadowed by the heavy fog of fear and compliance. I didn't want to lose her completely, though I hardly knew how to hold on. And so the days passed with this strange duality, an outward calm that masked the storm inside. The rare moments when Alan's kindness peeked through were bewildering and cruel reminders of what had been and what I was losing. His care felt like control, and my freedom became a word I whispered in dreams. I wanted to break free, but I was trapped in the delicate silence of his corrections and my own self-doubt. The escape seemed impossible because it required reclaiming a voice I could hardly remember owning. I started to notice the spaces where my words once lived, growing emptier with each passing day. There was a silence creeping into my voice, a disappearance I could no longer deny. When I tried to speak, my sentences faltered and broke like fragile glass, slipping through shaking hands. The freedom to express myself wasn't just limited. It felt stolen, like a part of me was vanishing. The memories blurred. I found myself doubting what I remembered, questioning if the conversations that replayed in my head even happened as I thought. Mistakes multiplied in my mind, a catalog of uncertainties and fear. I was losing track of reality, tangled in a web where my own thoughts betrayed me. The lines between truth and doubt twisted and blurred until I barely knew which side I stood on. Fear filled the quiet spaces between my breaths. I was afraid to talk, afraid to be wrong, afraid to be judged. The silence grew heavy inside me, pressing in like a weight that made my chest ache. Each word felt dangerous, like stepping on thin ice ready to crack. I learned to hold back, to swallow my thoughts before they could escape and unravel the fragile piece I was clinging to. Conversations became battles, fought in whispers and hesitations. I caught myself apologizing before I even understood what I was saying. Desperation crept in, an urge to avoid conflict, to disappear in plain sight. I started each sentence with soft warnings like, "Maybe I'm wrong, but..." or, "Sorry, I don't mean to bother," as if my very existence needed permission to speak. Memory felt unstable, slipping like sand through my fingers. Sometimes I would question if I had dreamed events, or if they were real. I tried piecing together fragments of the past, but found nothing solid to hold onto. It was as if the chapters of my life were being rewritten without my consent, leaving me disoriented and lost. I saw my reflection, eyes shadowed, lips tight, shoulders bent under the invisible weight. I was present but not really there, a ghost inhabiting a shell that no longer felt like home. The emotional fog was thick, suffocating. It dulled my senses and muffled the brightness I once carried. I was trapped inside a silence that screamed louder than any shout. The house echoed with my quiet resignations. His voice was a distant judge, reminding me at every turn that I was mistaken, deluded, too emotional, or simply not enough. I could feel his cold authority silently pushing me into smaller corners, forcing me to shrink until I was barely visible. My autonomy wasn't just slipping away. It was collapsing under the weight of relentless doubt. There were moments when I would pause mid-sentence, breath caught, heart pounding with the terror of being corrected again. The hesitation wasn't just about words. It was a fear of being wrong in the deepest parts of myself. I wanted to scream, to rage against the cage, but my voice was a whisper trapped inside a locked room. I longed for clarity, but found only confusion. I wanted to hold on to my memories and my sense of self, but the fog thickened, blurring the edges until I couldn't tell truth from illusion. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a prison built with invisible bricks. Every day was a slow unraveling. I felt myself fading, not with a bang, but a quiet erosion. The voice I once owned was slipping through cracks I couldn't see, leaving behind a fragile shell of doubt and pain. I was losing my grip on who I was, and it terrified me more than any confrontation ever could. But even in the darkest moments, a faint spark remained. Somewhere in the depths of confusion and fear, a part of me still remembered what it meant to be heard, to be real. I didn't know how to reach for it yet, but it was there, flickering beneath layers of silence and shadow, waiting for the day it could rise again. That afternoon in the garden started just like any other, a quiet moment between me and the world outside the walls where my voice was usually weighed and measured. I was sitting on the wooden bench beneath the old oak tree, the sun warming my face, when Mrs. Langley came by. She smiled at me with the kind of ease that made the breath catch in my chest, the kind of simplicity I hadn't felt in years. We talked about nothing much, really. A recipe she had tried, the new movie playing at the small theater down the street. I laughed along with her easily, sharing my own stories, offering opinions without the familiar knot of fear tightening in my throat. It felt strange, and yet natural, like stepping into a new skin I didn't know I had. She told me I should come more often, that my company was light and refreshing. I smiled, a real smile, and felt my chest swell with something close to hope. For a moment, the old reflex, apologizing for speaking, for being heard, was gone. I realized I had not said sorry once in our whole conversation, not one whisper of excuse for existing in voice. The silence afterward was massive and hollow. I carried it back with me through the garden gate and into the house, where shadows waited quietly. But inside, something was different. I sat alone for a long time, wondering if that woman who laughed without fear was the real me or a fleeting stranger. Maybe she had always existed beneath the layers of doubt and silence, waiting for her chance to bloom. I thought about how strange it was to be listened to, truly listened to, without correction or condescension. The weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying, the careful balancing act of what I could say and how, felt suddenly lifted, as if someone had unlocked a door I didn't know was closed. Returning home in silence, I questioned everything. Was this newfound lightness a beginning, or a fragile illusion? Had I always been this woman? Or had the years stolen her away gradually without me noticing? The garden bench felt like a small throne, a place where I reclaimed a part of myself that had grown faint with neglect. I could still hear his voice echoing in the corners of my mind, the cold certainty that I was mistaken, that my feelings were wrong. But that day, the echoes faltered, drowned by the sound of my own laughter, pure and unfiltered. It was not a roar, but a quiet power steadying itself. Something shifted in me that afternoon. Not a triumphant break, but a subtle, silent turning toward who I might yet become. The freedom did not come with anger or rebellion. It came in the simplest form, a voice no longer trembling, a gaze no longer lowering, a spirit starting to rise beneath the weight. The realization was almost too delicate to hold on to, yet it stayed, a secret candle flickering in the dim room of my heart. I sensed that the path ahead would not be easy, but here, in the warmth of a neighbor's kindness and my own quiet courage, I felt the first stirrings of a truth I had longed for. The opposite of fear is not courage, it is presence. That afternoon, for the first time in a long time, I heard myself. There was a moment, not marked by shouting or violence, but by a quiet authority that shook me to my core. Alan's voice was calm, but cold, when he told me I had misunderstood everything again. The weight behind his words wasn't loud, but it crushed me from the inside. A verdict passed without trial, a judgment I couldn't escape. I remember that afternoon vividly. The room was still, the air thick with tension just beneath the surface. I tried to explain, to say what I felt, but his gaze cut through me like ice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority in his tone made me feel small, wrong, unworthy. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any argument. That moment wasn't an outburst. It was control, exercised with precision. I absorbed the message deep inside, folding it into the fabric of my thoughts, letting it shape how I saw myself. From then on, doubts nested in my mind like unwanted guests. I began to believe I frequently misunderstood, that my feelings were misplaced, that I was the problem. Years passed, but that voice haunted me. Not his actual words, but the echo of judgment inside my head. Sometimes, when I was alone, I caught myself reliving that moment, the coldness radiating from a man who should have been my partner, my refuge. Instead, he had become the silent force pressing me down. But then, there was a turning point. I stood in front of the mirror one afternoon, the house quiet, except for the sound of my own breathing. I looked at my reflection, the woman who had hidden and apologized for too long. It was the first time I spoke out loud, just to myself, a trembling voice but mine to command. I told myself firmly, I didn't misunderstand. I had understood differently from him, and that was okay. Saying those words felt like breaking a dam inside me. The certainty I had withheld for years flooded through my veins. In that moment, speaking aloud was an act of rebellion, not loud or violent, but quiet and resolute. I was no longer alone inside my mind. For the first time, my voice didn't waver, didn't shrink away under the weight of others' judgment. That reflection in the mirror wasn't just a face, it was a declaration. I was reclaiming a piece of myself, the part that had been silenced by authority and doubt. The cold control of his past slipped slightly, replaced by a fragile but unyielding light. It wasn't a moment of triumph or victory. It was a still breath, a small but profound step toward healing. I could feel the weight lifting just enough to breathe deeper, to speak clearer, to begin again without fear shadowing my words. I started writing down sentences in a small notebook, without excuses or justifications. Each phrase was a small act of defiance, a stitch in the fabric of my own voice. I didn't correct myself halfway through anymore. I allowed the words to stand whole, even if uncertain or awkward. It felt like reclaiming parts of myself, one simple sentence at a time. I began venturing out more, talking with other women in the neighborhood, slowly stepping into small groups. Sometimes, I even left comments on YouTube videos, quiet little sparks of presence on a screen. Each interaction, no matter how modest, chipped away at the walls built by years of silence. One day, my granddaughter came to visit. She looked at me with bright eyes and said softly, "Grandma, your voice is beautiful." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. I told her with a quiet pride that it just took me a long time to learn how to listen to it. Her innocent belief in me was like a mirror reflecting back the courage I thought I'd lost. I even changed my email signature from "sorry for the inconvenience" to "thank you for reading." It was a small detail, but it mattered. It was an announcement to myself and the world that I deserved to be heard and respected. I still hesitated at times, afraid to finish a thought, but I allowed myself those small completions, no longer trapped by the urge to apologize. The opposite of fear is not courage. It is presence. That thought has settled deep inside me, like a quiet flame. It's been a long journey, from doubt to this fragile truth held lightly but firmly in my chest. I realize now that strength isn't loud or forceful. It's steady breath, an unwavering stand in the face of shadows. I wonder how many times I asked forgiveness just for existing out loud. How many times I softened my voice, dimmed my light, hidden pieces of myself to avoid conflict or judgment. And I ask myself, what if your story is not so different from mine? What if you have a voice buried beneath layers of fear, waiting for the day you'll listen to it? If this story touched something inside you, maybe your voice was never truly silent. Maybe it's just waiting for you to hear it. I invite you gently to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, to start listening to your own voice with kindness. Sometimes the first step toward freedom is simply being present to yourself. Your voice matters. It always has.